Hi, I'm Sarithre, and today I want to talk about bags. No, not the bags under my eyes, those will never go away. I mean project bags, specifically for cross-stitch works in progress, but also for a few other crafts, and hopefully we'll be making one. Before we get into making one, I did want to show off a few of the ones that I already use on a regular basis. I actually do a lot of stitching in hand, small projects. I don't necessarily use a big old Q-snap or anything, so a small little bag just like this is pretty much it, really. I made this a while ago. It's one of the first projects I did with a sewing machine. I had not used a sewing machine basically ever before that, so something simple that you can make. I also made a similar bag on a video for this channel where I did some chicken scratch embroidery. They're about the same size. This one's a little bit smaller. But let's show you what I put inside my bag. And here we have some fabric. I don't have anything in progress right now, so I just threw together kind of some kits. Scissors, with a scissor fob, of course. A hoop for if I want to stitch in a hoop. My pattern, folded up and shoved in there because you always print out an extra copy. This is great for, thread drops. Why is my brain not working? Probably because it's 2 in the morning. That's when my cat's asleep. You could just do like a little baggie of bobbins or whatever. I also usually include my seam ripper just in case. I have a little needle book that I keep my needles in, and measuring tape. You never know when that's going to be needed, so you know, keep that handy. So you can fit quite a bit in there and have it on the go, whether you like a hoop or just stitching in hand. Now I also really like stitching with a Q-snap, so I have a slightly larger bag that I got from the Etsy shop Crafty Like a Monkey, which is just a cute name, and this fits the 6-inch Q-snap quite easily, even with a bunch of extra fabric just kind of jammed in the grime guard, and a full mini size box for thread, which this one's kind of empty, but I'm probably making all sorts of noise on the mic, I'm sorry. This one I usually have a Biscornu full of needles, and of course scissors, usually like a seam ripper or whatever, and whatever thread I need for this project. This is great especially if I need a lot of thread, if I'm doing a high color pattern, and that works out great. And it's got a little strap for carrying, so that one's very useful. Hi, Outro Sierra here, coming back to film a little bit for the middle of this video because I forgot to mention something. You know how I was talking about these larger bags and how they're great for like Q-snaps and everything, but they're just one big pocket. There's no pockets. So I use a mini bobbin box because I have one. They are harder to find. They don't sell them as often, but I have one. The other way to do it if you do not have one is you can put your bobbins on a ring. I'll link those down below. That is of course also dependent on whether your bobbin has a little hole at the top or floss drop or whatever. And you can just chuck them in there with your Q-snap and scissors and etc. And you could have them all loose in there. But you could also have smaller bags within your bag. So one of my favorite hacks, and I'm sorry for being noisy while doing this, so one of my favorite hacks are pencil pouches. Now I made this one, it's completely made of vinyl. I also have another one that's like vinyl on top and fabric on the bottom, and I'll post a picture of that because I can't find it. I don't know where it is, but that's beside the point. I can make another one. These are really simple to make. They're nice and small and they fit lots of pens. Here's my Micron collection. But they also fit bobbins. I don't have a bunch on hand here, so I'm going to also shove my little biscornu with my needle in there. So that keeps my needle handy. And sure, why not let me also throw my embroidery scissors in there. Look at that. You have a pouch for bobbins that keeps them mostly straight. It's better if you fill it up as much as you can. If you only have a few colors, then they just kind of slide around. But they are still technically contained. And it holds your needle. You could just stab it into a biscornu like I did, or, you know, a little needle book, or one of those little needle tubes would work in there. Whatever you want to do. But my point is, small bag in large bag, also an option. Your bag doesn't have to fit the entirety of it. So let's grab a Q-snap that doesn't have anything on it right now. Shove it in there. Theoretically, I had fabric on it in my working project, but also my bag of bobbins. So that's an option. Wait, no, I found it. I found it. It's a little squished. But because it has a fabric bottom, it was less annoying to stitch because it was just a single strip of vinyl. But it's really nice to hold bobbins because you can still see the colors through the top. But you don't have to stitch with this much vinyl because I get it. Vinyl is annoying to sew with. This was like this was maybe the third project I ever did, so the stitching is wonky as fuck, but it works, so who cares? Anyway, I also have another one from the same shop, Star Trek one, of course. This one currently has a knitting project in it, though, some socks. So, can be useful for multiple crafts. Speaking of which, when I asked about project bags on the Pixel Stitch Discord, somebody shared a bag that they had that had like little felt dividers, and it reminded me that I had a box, or I guess a bag, designed for storing electrical cables. And I mean like charging cables and battery packs and such, which is why it has these symbols on the front. But I'm always up for repurposing stuff for other things. So if you have a bag of some sort laying around that fits your works in progress, you don't need something specifically made for it to use it. You know what I mean? And the cool thing about that is it fits the 6x6 Q-snap in perfectly, again, even with all that excess fabric crammed in the grime guard. And what I've done is use the little felt dividers it comes with to make a row for bobbins. You can see I can fit quite a decent amount in there. There's actually room for more, like I could fit like another probably 5 if I cram them in there. And also biscornu, where I would stab my needles. And I use the second divider to act as a little barrier in there because the bobbins aren't quite as tall as it. So I don't want them to slide around when I'm not working out of it, you know? And it just slips right on in there. And that way, if I shove this in a bag or it gets jostled around, those bobbins are still all in place in a row. And of course, if you have a printed out pattern, you could include it there. I also crammed a few things into these tops, like this can hold scissors. I clipped some floss drops on there with a little ring, and I can just carefully tuck the thread into a pocket. I have a seam ripper, some measuring tape. This is actually pretty useful. It is kind of a lunch bag size thing, so if you don't want a super large bag, but it definitely shows you can repurpose pretty much anything for a project bag. Now, another, now I told you I made this for the Floss Adventure last year, but the year before that, I made this little sewing kit. It was completely, I did a crazy quilting all around it, and some tatting, all sorts of stuff. And it's a little folio type case that I use for my English paper piecing. A little pocket where I keep usually my project. It's got a little clip for scissors. It's got a place to put needles. It's got my thread. And a big old pocket for quilting clips and whatever else I need. And I love this thing. I use it constantly. It's usually sitting on my couch so that if I ever need something to work on, I have everything right there for some English paper piecing. And that's kind of what inspired me to do this video / article, because of course there is a written version of this video on my website if you'd like to follow along. I want a folio type thing like this, but for cross stitch. Now, there are a lot of project bag styles out there. When I was looking, I found kind of a few main categories of project bag. You have the large square that you can just shove all your stuff in. You have the large square, but with a vinyl front so that you can see through it and see what's in the bag, which is nice. I found a bunch of project folios that had like a large pocket or several large pockets for you to include all of your materials in. And then another style that I found that I really ended up liking was the folio type project bag, but with individual bobbin pockets. So that's what I want to try to make today. Now, in the written version of this video, I'm going to link to a bunch of different sewing patterns that I found, and a bunch of different shops that I found that sell finished versions of a lot of those different styles of project bags. So whether you want to make your own or you were just really interested in owning a similar bag, you can do that. The one that I think I'm going to be making is... The one that I think that I'm going to be making today is the Stitch and Go case by What Sazy Makes. And it's really cute. I'll put a picture here. It's got the bobbin pockets, enough bobbin pockets for 20 colors, which is usually more than enough for my patterns. I try to keep my color palettes pretty low. It's got a big pocket for a hoop. Now, I don't use hoops very often, but I will try to modify it to fit a Q-snap. I'll probably stitch one as called for in the pattern, just whatever the instructions say, just to see what size it is, whether it fits a Q-snap already, what pieces need expanding, that sort of thing. And it's got a larger pocket on the other side for like scissors and other notions, and a leaf pocket. So it kind of combined a lot of the things that I was looking for. If you look at the reviews, people have also modified it quite a bit. They've added a zipper around the whole thing so that you can zip it up. And I'm wondering if by adding that zipper around, I could just, instead of using the pocket for the hoop, if the Q-snap will just go in there and I can just zip it closed with the Q-snap in there. And I think that'd be perfect. So we're going to try it and we'll find out what works. The other modification I see people do a lot is adding a handle on the edge, which seems like a great idea, personally. And a couple of them added like little hangy tabs that you could hang tools on with the little clips, like if you have a scissor fob type clip. Or you could clip floss drops off of them. So that might be a cool idea to add. I don't have any hardware for those though, so I'll have to see what I can come up with, because I don't want to buy any materials for this particular project, because part of the point of this was to go through some of my fabric stash. I have a lot of fabric, but I have gone ahead and cut out all of the pieces needed for this. Now, since this is a paid for pattern, which somebody else spent their time putting together to sell, I'm not going to show you how to make this. It is not a tutorial. I will show some clips of me putting this together, and I will tell you what modifications I make if I make any. But obviously, if you want to make your own, purchase the pattern. It's like 10 bucks. You'll be fine. However, in the written version of this video, I will include links to some styles of project bags that there are free patterns for. So especially the large boxy ones, you don't need to buy a pattern. So if that's your budget, do a different style, or buy a pattern. You'll be able to make them over and over again. It'll be great. You could even sell the finished products. I believe the pattern actually says that they are happy for you to sell what you make with this pattern on a small scale, as long as you credit the designer, which is fair. So if you want to make your own and you want to pay off the cost of the materials and the pattern, you could do that. You could sell a few. But for now, I'm going to make this one. The other fun thing about this project is, remember that English paper piecing project that I had in this folio bag that I've been working on all week? This is a project that I started in 2019, and I still haven't finished. I'm missing a few greens. I'm almost done though. This was missing quite a few when I started this week, but I figured it's been sitting there for, 7 years? I should probably get around to finishing it. All right, so this is a pattern that I found on Pinterest back in 2019 from I Am Luna's Soul. It was a freebie, and it is no longer available on their website. Their website now has like enamel pins and keychains and prints, and they're pretty cute. I'll show some here because they deserve your money. But I still have the pattern somewhere, and honestly, it's pretty straightforward. You have hexagon, you have squares, you have triangles. Put them together, make rainbow. So I'm gonna finish stitching these last two on, and then I'm gonna applique this to my cover fabric, which is this glittery black, and that's gonna be the cover of my folio. You can't even see that. Look how glittery it is. Oh my god, I'm excited. This is a larger folio. The finished size, I believe, was 11 by 9, so basically a like normal copy paper length fold, like that's the folded size, so 2 pieces of paper next to each other for the full folio size. So it is a larger folio. I'm not using it as a travel folio. It's mainly going to live on my couch so that I can work on projects after work, but I'm excited. So that's going to be my cover. For the inside, I have a similar, but not glittery, marbled black that's just going to be like the inner pockets. For my binding to tie in the rainbow, I have this fun, like swirly, rainbow-ish fabric that's going to be the binding around the whole thing. And then I wanted the fabric behind the bobbins to be very like plain, because you don't want to distract from the colors of the floss, right? So a white marble. And then for the vinyl pocket, I have just like a white batik. It's like a nice thin pattern on it. And for my slip pocket, stars, because whimsy. So that'll be fun. I haven't decided yet if I want to embroider on some of the things. Maybe on the slip pocket, since I'm not going to embroider vinyl, obviously. But I did enjoy doing the embroidery on this pocket, so we'll see. Yeah. Ooh, or maybe I could embroider something in the middle of these. Or at least the middle one. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Oh, hey, you woke up. Oh, you're the cutest. Oh my god. Yeah. Say hi. She is so comfortable, y'all. Probably not big enough for a Q-snap, because then when you go to close it, it does this. But a nerd hoop might work. I had to order a longer zipper, but maybe once we have the zipper connected, we can just close it around, like just in there. Maybe, probably not an 8x8, but the 6x6 would probably work. We shall see. Okay, so it's mostly put together. I just need to add the binding, but I wanted to show you how I'm adding the zipper. So I basically opened up the zipper and clipped it all along the edge, curving around corners, so that it's the full width of the case. And I'm going to just baste stitch this on, just to hold it in place, and then we'll add the binding. Let's spend some time pursing zippers, because this is annoying as well. So we have it haphazardly sewn on there. I'm going to trim the corners in a moment, but I wanted to test whether the zipper works. So we're going to try zipping up the folio, and look at that. Boop. Perfect. I can't seem to film anything without rubbing up against my microphone, so I'm going to try this again. Look what I made. This turned out to be more of a sewing vlog about making this particular pouch, but the idea of this video was just to point out how you can use basically anything to store your works in progress in. You do not have to make a big fancy folio, but it is fun. So whether you have, you know, a sewing pouch, just shoved your bobbins in a pencil case, or you have a large pouch to shove everything in, it doesn't matter. There are so many options and so many bags that you probably already own that you can easily repurpose to store your whips in, because ultimately the only thing is that you need to be able to take all your stuff with you so that you can finish your cross-stitch project. The cross-stitch project is what matters. But sometimes it's fun to take time out to make something extra special for your stash. and that's what I wanted to do today. Now, this pattern is by what Sazy makes, so all credit goes to her for the design of the pouch itself, and I'll go through its features here shortly. But look how pretty it turned out, and with this sparkly fabric, I can't get over it. It's great. I will break down how much time I spent on this here in a moment, but let's look inside. I already have my current project in there. Look at all those colors. They didn't all fit in the bobbins because it had more than 20 colors, so I just have a ring with the rest of my bobbins in here, and that's fine. This little pouch here holds my pattern. I don't have anything in these pouches currently, but I could put my measuring tape or something in there, I don't know. My needles are on this square of sparkly felt to match the outside, and I ended up, instead of embroidering in this area, what I did was I made a small English paper pieced hexagon flower to put in there, and I tucked a little magnet in there, so now my needle minder can just, where'd it go? Yep, my needle minder can just pop right on there. I don't need both a needle minder and a needle felt square, but you know, it's there. I like needle minders, it works. I could have put this instead of that. Whatever. And all of my bobbins are on there. They're beautiful. And I found out that it fits a small nerd hoop perfectly. Now, I'm not showing you my design because I'm still working on it, and it's a secret. But this small nerd hoop actually is the first time that I'm working with a nerd hoop, and I kind of love it. It holds your fabric so very tight. I'm very impressed by it. It is, however, very light, which for some people is a pro. Like, you don't want a wrist workout holding your project. It is super light. If that's what you're going for, great. I still kind of prefer my Q-snap because I don't know, I'm used to the heft. It is what it is, but I do like the nerd hoops, and I'll probably get a few more. But the small one fits in perfectly. If you wanted to do a medium nerd hoop, because of the top bit here, you would have to add about an inch of height to this whole thing, but not much, honestly. But that's working out well. There is another pocket if you wanted to put your pattern in there instead, or if you wanted a second hoop, or if, you know, two projects on the go, why not? Now, for the Q-snap lovers like me, I did find out that you can, in fact, use a Q-snap in there. Normally, if you just have a little tie that it comes with the pattern, it would still fit. It's a little bulgy, but that's normal. The ability to zip it up is great because it adds that little extra protection on the edges, and I don't have to worry about them sliding out at all. It actually does fit a 6-inch hoop. Sorry, a 6-inch Q-snap. If you wanted an 8-inch Q-snap to fit, you probably have to go a bit wider. Because it's just barely too big for the folio as is. But if you added maybe an inch on each side, it would work out well. So for those of you considering modifying this pattern to fit a Q-snap or a larger nerd, that's what you need to know. Now, let's talk time. I told you earlier that this English paper piecing project I started in 2019, and it was mostly done. I had maybe a dozen pieces left, all of the outside triangles and squares, and that's because I started this before I had a very big fabric stash, so I didn't have enough different fabrics to have them all be completely unique, which is why there are some repeats. Like this fabric was used like 3 times. But now that I have more fabrics, I was able to finish off the last few rings. There were, like I said, about a dozen pieces. So overall, this was 80% done when I got to it this year. Even so, I still spent another 3.5 hours picking out fabrics, cutting out small pieces, basting them, stitching them to the project, etc. If I had done this whole thing based on that, so if I did about 20% now at 3.5 hours, that would have been maybe 18 hours total. Obviously, this is not a necessary part of the pouch, so it should not be included in the overall estimate of how long it would take you to make a pouch. It could have just been a pretty sparkly cover. But I spent roughly 18 hours. This was started before I tracked my hours, so I have no idea. Now, the quilting, I did do, I don't know if you can see it, I did do just regular diamond quilting on this fabric before I appliqued this on. And that took about 2 hours, mainly because I drew it on the back of this. So on the batting, on the back, I drew it out so that I could follow it. And that itself took like an hour because I don't know what I'm doing. And then basting this EPP shape onto this took about 2 hours of itself because it's all hand stitched ladder stitch around the edge. And then I did end up doing little cross stitches in the middle of each one just to make sure the whole thing was secure onto the cover instead of kind of, you know, floating on there. And then the mini rainbow, because remember I did this mini EPP, these are 1/2-inch hexagons. That took about an hour and a half, all said and done, including basting it onto this thing. And the overall time for, I say pick fabric prep, which involves, you know, cutting out all the different sizes of each fabric that's called for, all the binding strips, etc. But I'm also including in that picking out my fabrics, because one thing that people forget is that making decisions takes time. So I had to decide on what fabric I was using for the cover, what fabric I was using for the binding, what fabric I was using for the background, for the inside, which is a different fabric for this pouch. Keep in mind that that stuff takes time. It's fun time, and it's not like active working time, but it's still time that it takes for your project. So all in all, I have down fabric prep as taking 3.5 hours. Ultimately, stitching it all together, sometimes unstitching it and restitching it because nobody's perfect, took 12 hours to put it together. A lot of that is ironing, like ironing all of the binding strips into binding. Obviously, I didn't iron my vinyl because that would have been bad, but that 12 hours also takes into account that I was working with a lot of vinyl. And if you've never worked with vinyl, it's annoying because it kind of sticks to your sewing machine, to like as you're going through it. So I don't know if you noticed in my time lapse, but one tip I have for you is to take a sheet of paper, a normal piece of copy paper, and put it over where the vinyl is. And typically you're stitching on the cotton edging. That piece of paper on there keeps it so it doesn't stick to your foot. So it slides easier, so you can get it done easier. So in case you were wondering what that was about, there you go. But that means that this whole thing took about 40 hours. Is it worth it? Absolutely. But wow, wasn't what I was expecting to do with my time this month, but I saw this pattern and I really loved it, so I made it. And I'm going to use it constantly, mainly to justify the 40 hours I spent on this. Would it have been easier to just make a pouch like this with, you know, just a bag lining? Yep. Probably, but you always have to go a bit extra. And I like challenging myself to do things that I haven't tried. I have worked with vinyl before, but not super much. I have not done a big old pouch like this. And I think it turned out pretty Will I make another one of this? Probably. I'm gonna do other stuff first because this took forever and I don't have that kind of free time. But since it was part of a article, I was able to justify spending some time on it. So thank you to my patrons for making this possible. Would I have done it anyway? Probably. But you made it happen faster. So thank you. Now, if you do not want to spend 40 hours on a bag, I have the article down below listing all the different types of bags that I found, all sorts of different patterns that I found, free patterns, paid patterns, bags that you can just buy are all linked down below. So there's something for everyone there. But I also encourage you to look around your stash, look at, bags that you already have and use those if you can, whether that's an old tote bag that you just add some pockets to store your bobbins or whatever, or maybe like an old makeup bag would work. I do encourage you to find uses for bags that you already have, whether that's for a cross-stitch whip kit or for something else, because ultimately we don't want to create a bunch of extra waste, but it is sometimes nice to have something specially made for your craft. And every time I see this on my couch, I am both inspired and encouraged to want to work on my project, which is an important part of your whip bag, is to make you want to work on it. So if this is what it takes to inspire you, do it. It's worth it. But if you just need something to cart your stuff around, any old bag will do. But whatever you decide to put your stuff in, just keep creating. Whatever